We're back.
We are.
It's good to be back. It's been a couple weeks.
I know it seems like it's been a long time, but it really has only been a couple weeks.
Yeah, not
but a
too
lot
bad.
of stuff always happens.
And it's so true. And we had spring break.
We did.
And then we've been kind of getting back in the swing for our second 8 weeks. And here we are.
Oh, that's right. So that's why it is.
What is the topic today? What are we going to talk about?
There has been some talk and some different things that have come up about repressed memories.
Okay.
And I just thought it would be kind of interesting to talk about, like, are they real, first of all, and then how do we make them not repressed anymore so that we can actually remember? And then if we do that, how legitimate or how real are those memories?
Right.
Because of it just brings up so many things, because our memories are influenced by so many things. And if we are bringing them back on purpose and they're like something that's been repressed because it's usually a traumatic event or something, then the way we bring it back, is it real? Is it a real memory? Or is it a way that you would think that you need to remember it because it was a traumatic event?
Right.
So I think that's what we're going to talk about today.
No, good. That's interesting. So is it kind of like a dream? Like like you say, it's influenced by all these other things. A dream, for example, might be influenced by how much you slept the night before, or what you had for dinner.
Sure.
It's that, what are those really long green vegetables? They're not artichokes, but and they make you
asparagus.
Yes, they make your urine smell like
asparagus.
Yeah, they make asparagus. Yeah. That too is something. The types of things that can kind of get into your mindset. Memories are like that.
Absolutely. And that's the thing, is like your dream. And we talk about dreams in my class all the time because it's part of a state of consciousness. And when we talk about dreams, a lot of people say, I don't dream. And according to the sleep cycle, and if we were to look at your brain scans, then it would say, yes, everybody dreams, because everybody goes through REM. And that's when they think dreaming happens. So you do dream, you have the process of what we consider to be dreaming, but you only sometimes remember because of your memory. And it could be, more emotional things that you have high emotion about. Usually scary things are more often remembered. So scary dreams, out of all of them, are more often remembered. Or if it deals with somebody that's very realistic, then you're going to more likely to remember it. And that's kind of this thing, is, again, it is influenced by what you want to remember. And that brings up the whole idea of lucid dreams. Have you ever heard of lucid dreams before?
Where you're in control of the dream?
Yes.
Pretty much the best kind of dream.
Right? That would be. However, the truth is if we look at one of the dream theories, which is called activation synthesis theory, it says that during REM, neurotransmitters are randomly firing and electrical charges are randomly firing as well and bringing up different memories. Okay, so if that is how you dream, then there's no way you could lucid dream. The only thing you really do is control what you remember dreaming. So that's how you control your dream. So lucid dreaming is a perception. It's just the way that you remember doing it. And that's what we do see a lot of times with our memories. We have very ineffective memories. One of the leading psychologists that did a lot on memories her name's Elizabeth Loftus. And she had this really interesting case that she studied. And it was this person, her name was Eileen Franklin. And when she was young, her best friend, they were 8 years old, was murdered. And they couldn't find the person who did it. So you can imagine that would be very traumatic. Well, she was seeing a therapist, and about 21 years later, she all of a sudden had her memory came back. She said that she remembered everything about it because she was looking at her kids. And when she remembered her dad being the one who molested and abused and killed her best friend.
Wow.
So from this testimony, they put him in jail. They put him in prison because they thought, why would a daughter say this? Well, during her testimony, during all of the investigation, they realized that she had been hypnotized. And during hypnosis, she all of a sudden remembered things happening. Well, if you know the definition of hypnosis, it is you being susceptible to somebody else, the hypnotist. So the person who's being hypnotized is now susceptible to the suggestions of the person who is hypnotizing them. Well, they feel like if you look at it, legitimacy of remembering something through hypnotism in court is not legal. It's not admissible in court. So they then went on and said all of these things. So
is hypnosis a form of treatment?
It can be. It can be.
Why would she was under hypnosis when she remembered? Was she being interviewed by police when she did the hypnosis? Or was she in treatment when she had the hypnosis? Or wasn't like a magic show or something where those people get up there and take volunteers? Okay.
She was actually in treatment. And they were using hypnosis to help her remember what happened, because that was obviously something that was causing a lot of issues because of what had happened to her past, traumatic event. And so they figured it was probably some repressed memory that they remembered, that she knew what happened, but it was so traumatic that she didn't want to talk about it. Well, DNA evidence, hypnosis later, they realized he didn't do it. So through the hypnosis, through this altered state of consciousness, it actually made her remember something that didn't actually happen.
Interesting.
Okay, so this is
So he's free now, though.
He is. He finally got out, and the whole time, he never said, you know what, yeah. He was like, I never did this. I would never do this. I don't know why my daughter is saying these things about me. And then they found out, okay, he didn't do it. And then another thing, she also accused him of another incident, that there was a 19-year-old girl, I believe it was, and she had been molested and abused, and she said that her dad did it. Well, they had DNA evidence at that time, and it wasn't him. And so it was just this constant idea of being hypnotized. And when we are in an altered state and we want to be, correct, we want to make the other person happy. Like, we are natural born pleasers. We want to make the other person happy. And when we are in that altered state and susceptible to...
Susceptible or suggestible?
Both.
Yeah.
I would say both of them. And then in that point, right, maybe it was asked, like, I don't have the actual transcript. There's a very long article that does lay out everything about the whole Eileen Franklin case that Elizabeth Loftus did. But they feel like what happened is they kept asking her about the man who was involved. And most of the time when women think of men, the first man that really does pop to their mind is their dad. And so therefore it was almost like they implanted this memory into her head, and she wanted to make sense of it. And so she made up a story, and then she actually remembered it. So now it's a false memory.
Which seems like more of a problem.
Absolutely, right?
Yeah. Now
she really does think, she really had the idea that her dad did it, even though they were telling him, nope, this didn't happen. She had been through the hypnosis, so she really had planted those new memories in, and they just happened to be false memories. Right. So it is possible. I know for a fact that planting false memories is possible, because we did it. Okay, during some of our different psychological studies and social psychology, we made people remember doing things that they never did. And it wasn't like...
What is the name of that, by the way? Where in films and in literature, where you have like the common, the social psychology phenomenon, right? Where where people remember things, some type of a syndrome or some type of where people remember things that weren't there. Like, for example, if all of us remembered the Goonies, a very specific scene in the Goonies that was really no character in the Goonies had ever actually said that. And I'm trying to think of like an example of that. What is the name of that?
I don't know. I don't know.
It's a syndrome of some sort, I think. But anyway, I'm sorry, I interrupted.
But yeah, no, that's kind of this idea. Is like if everybody says it over and over and over, then and it changes the way you remember it. Did it happen? And that's kind of this idea, right? So what we did was we did a lot of research on what we called stigmatized groups.
The Mandela effect.
Oh, yeah.
Is that what that is?
Yeah.
Is that
Yeah.
is that the term for it? Is that the same thing?
It can be. Yeah, and that's the thing is that anytime you're in social psych, there's so many terms and syndromes, and so yeah, it is.
Right. Okay.
So, anyways, what we did is we studied a lot of stigmatized groups. So groups where people had, very positive and very negative attitudes to them. So we can actually measure and try to move them. And so what we did is we had a list of words, a list of actions, a list of things that they would do towards a certain group. Okay, and so they would circle the ones that they had done. And they circled them. And then I said, okay, I need you to go through this list again. And I need you to highlight all the ones that you've actually done. And you need to be 100% positive you've done it. So they went through and did that. And then I'm like, okay, now I want you to look back through the ones that you said you've done. And I want you to initial. Okay, now I want what you to do is make sure that you scratch through the actions you have never done towards that stigmatized group, whatever it happened to be. And they would go through and then, okay, now I need to highlight the ones you have never done with this other green highlighter there. Okay. So then the very next one, what we did is we said, okay, we need you to help us out. We're going to have you write a little synopsis for our next experiment. And what I need you to do is you need to do this action, and this action, and kind of write it in first person so that way it seems like you're doing it, like a movie script. So they would write it down. Well, we just happened to pull 3 of the actions that they said they had never done towards the stigmatized group. And just how so happened, the character in this
You mean
synopsis.
it was really an accident, or this was part of the experiment?
This was the experiment.
Okay.
We did it on purpose.
And they signed on
yes.
for that? Okay.
So they know that they're going to get a psychological manipulation.
But they don't know
what's
what
going to happen. Right. So then they did it, right? And then the next time they came back and were like, okay, thank you so much, but we need a lot more detail. We need you to write this synopsis using you as a main character. This is your supporting character, and it happened to be that stigmatized group. And they had to do these 3 actions that they said they had never done, but they didn't. It wasn't like, remember, you didn't do these actions, right?
Right.
So they wrote it again. Well, they ended up doing it 3 times. 4th time they came back, and we had them do the list again. And all of a sudden, they were not sure on what actions they had done. In fact, some of them would circle all 3 of those actions and say, yes, I've done that.
Were they worded differently?
Nope. Everything was the same. So then what we did after that is we showed them in that same one, the ones that they said that they did, the very first one, the actions, and we showed them the ones that they did after our manipulation, and they were so confused because they were like, wait a minute, I really thought I did this. Like I remember, and they can tell us details, but those details were what they wrote in that synopsis instead of what really happened. But because they had done it in detail so much, they really thought that they had done it, and we implanted
Gotcha.
false memories.
So did they, were there words, like specific phrases that were transferable between the two? They were the ones that were making it, but you know how like you can have, you can write an entire paragraph on, let's say, I don't know, highways.
Okay.
And how much fun highways are and all these other things. Well, part of the paragraph though is, that every now and then you run into a highway that's a little bit overgrown. And then transfer that phrase to be the first sentence in the next paragraph that somebody's going to read. Is it kind of like that when you talk about manipulating information or psychology? Is that
could be
the kind of thing?
Right. Could be like that primer.
Yeah.
Like it's like, look at this, and now let's see what your attitude really is about highways.
Right.
Sure. But in this situation, that's not what we did.
And I guess the event in that scenario might be that they remember highways being overrun at a more frequent, a much more frequent time period. I guess more often than it really occurred in the original paragraph. Would that be an example?
Yeah, that could be because we're highlighting it. We're making sure they see it over and over and over, which then could change their perception, their attitude, and their feelings, also their memory about a lot of them.
A lie repeated enough becomes
a memory. And that's what's scary. Like
it's scary.
It's like when we look at some of these, like for instance, Eileen Franklin, her dad ended up in prison for, I think it was 10 years almost.
Oh, lands.
Yeah, it wasn't like it was a short amount of time. Like he was there. And
there's no such thing as a short amount of time in a place like that.
I wouldn't think so. But that's what can happen. So if somebody's repressed memory affects somebody else, it could ruin their complete life. And the truth is it could be completely false. So it's kind of a scary situation because our memories aren't very good.
Right.
They just aren't. And we know this. One of the places we saw the biggest influence on that is in the courtroom. I don't know, I'm kind of dorky. Still like to watch court TV every once in a while and see different cases that are going up. And they really don't use eyewitnesses the way they used them before. And the reason is because we know that our memories aren't very good.
Right.
And just the way somebody asked the question could change the way you remember something. Okay, another Elizabeth Loftus experiment she did was she would have everybody watch a car accident. And then she would hand out information like a survey asking different questions, but she would just change one word and it would change the way people see it. For instance, she'd say, how fast were the cars going when they smashed into each other? Versus how fast were the cars going when they contacted each other? Okay, in just that, they all watch the same thing. In that, they already see them, the smashed are going at least 15 miles an hour faster.
Wow.
And it's just the way it was asked. It's not like they saw it differently. They maybe were in a car. That's not it. It was the words that were used. So we know in the legal system that a lot of times if you are prepping a witness, they will be asked the same question, they feel like, over and over. But the idea is that we're changing different words to make sure they remember it always the same. But
so is the and I guess that in an environment like a courtroom, you would have like the adversarial system at work, and you would have, I mean, presumably if the person that's trying to, I guess, make sure that it's validated, is asking consistently using the exact same language,
right,
and like on the other side, doing the trying to poke, I guess, creative problems
Sure.
in the testimony, and inconsistencies would ask things differently, specifically to target emotional
absolutely
susceptibility.
Yes, and to make you look like you're saying it inconsistently. So, I mean, they just say, wait, I just asked you that question, but it could have changed one word, and it could just make you remember it differently for whatever reason. Like if people were arguing versus people were fighting, right? It's like, okay, arguing or disagreeing versus fighting. Like that's a huge difference when you start thinking about it. And if you're nervous, if you're trying, if it's a big deal, sometimes it'll affect the way you remember things.
I mean, that's conflating the truth.
Yeah.
Isn't that the actual,
Sure.
the term for it is, but that's a problem in government politics as well.
Yeah.
One of the big reasons for it, obviously, is the types of surveys and polls that people do, and statesmen have to figure out what it is that the public believes about things, because they want to make sure that not that it's popular, but that it's supported and
Sure.
sustainable, especially while they're writing it.
Mm-hmm.
But then you do all the other ones as well, where you kind of have to go back and find. There's just a million ways of manipulating information, unfortunately. But that's part of living in a I guess in a society
Sure.
at all, is that you're kind of bound by the same rationale, might be, like where we're using language, but it's easy sometimes to conflate words that may mean a more intense or a less intense version of the same thing, but over time, if you focus on the more intense version, then your memory ends up more intense. Is that
Sure.
what you're talking about?
That's exactly what that's exactly what happens. And then if you can even imagine, if I can use certain words that would, make somebody remember something in the jury, where they can hear, oh, well, they were fighting. It's like, well, were they really fighting, or were they just arguing? And, they had a disagreement. And, if you just have a disagreement, it's way different than we are actually fighting, or we were in a brawl, and they will use those words on purpose.
Right.
To change your memory.
In 2016, the election that went on between Clinton and Trump, specifically, that the Russians were interfering in American elections, didn't talk about how they were interfering. And then, you come out on the other side of 2018 with the Mueller report and find out, or 2019 with the Mueller report, I'm trying to remember which year that came out. It's 2018, 19. That report comes out, and really it says that didn't happen. But instead what happened was basically that people were on social media taking information that was never good, was never real information, and sharing it because they didn't validate the information and do their own fact checking,
Right.
Which is doesn't mean that any one single source of information is perfect.
Right.
But there are more correct versions of things than incorrect versions.
Yeah.
And if you only pay attention to the things that people are sharing and you trust the people that are sharing and not necessarily paying the information the scrutiny that it deserves, it can totally change the outcome of an entire group of people accepting the legitimate authority of a winner in a national election, which
Absolutely.
is just an unbelievable,
And
that's just an unbelievable reality. It's true, though.
And it is. And that's kind of this idea is like, it is scary. And there's a lot of different techniques that people know of, right? We use them in advertising all the time. Social media shows up all the time with them, and it can be very manipulative. And that's,
Remember the old Zoloft commercial?
I don't know.
The one of the big bubble. It kind of looks like Kirby
Okay.
from Nintendo.
Okay.
It's like a big cloud, a big bubble, like a big pillow type
Yeah.
thing, and it's just kind of bouncing around, bouncing
I don't
through
know if
life.
I remember that.
You can see the sun is shining and
Right.
it's bouncing. I mean, Zoloft is an antidepressant, and
Yeah.
it's clearly marketing and propaganda.
Right.
Clearly working to try to persuade one person to believe one thing about, or an entire group of people to think, whatever it is that they're trying to make them, trying to help them suggest to them to get to the outcome that they want them to get to, which is just to buy the product that they're selling.
Absolutely. Yep. And that is what they do. And we
Kinda
know
like
that it works.
Kool-Aid is the interrupter, the one that breaks down the wall.
Yeah.
It breaks down walls, man.
That's
This
right.
is,
That's right.
And I forget
Yeah.
what he says whenever he breaks down the wall.
Hey, Kool-Aid. They say, hey, Kool-Aid, and he comes through.
He comes busting through
Yeah.
the wall. That's what
I don't even know if he says
every parent
anything, does
really
he?
wants. No.
I don't think he does. They
may
say,
not.
hey, Kool-Aid, and he comes busting
Break-
through the wall.
breaks
yeah.
in.
Wherever it is.
Yeah. Also there's in Ghostbusters, towards the end of that movie, there's a scene where Dan Aykroyd's character, they're at the very, very end, and it's when Zool, they're on top of the Empire State Building, and Zool, this, I guess, it looks like a 1980s female rock star
Yeah,
type
she's
person,
like
really short hair, buzz cut, and all that, and they talk about her, and they're like laughing and stuff, and she says, you must choose, what form what is it? She says the destructor comes in, and without anybody choosing, all of a sudden she says the choice has been made.
Yes.
And all of them turn around and they're like, I didn't say anything. We didn't say anything. We didn't make any type of choice. What happened here? Yeah. And Dan Aykroyd is just standing back there going, it just popped in there.
Yeah.
It just popped in there. And they said, what just popped in there?
The
Ray?
Stay Puffed
Yeah, and he
Marshmallow
said,
Man.
I couldn't think of something that couldn't ever possibly destroy us.
Yeah.
The Stay Puft Marshmallow Man. He's an angry sailor marshmallow, huge giant. But it's kind of my point is that who knows where ideas come from, which
Right.
is just another quote from Empire Records, a different movie.
Yeah.
The 1990s. Do you remember that whole movie? All right, so
Yes, of course. Damn the man.
That's right. Save the Empire. They've got the quarters that are glued to the ground.
Yes.
It's the same character. He's got that kid that tried to steal from Warren
Yeah.
is sitting there trying to pill up the quarters.
Yes.
And he says, well, who the hell glued these quarters to the floor? And he was like, what the hell for, man?
Yeah.
And he said, I don't have to explain my art to you.
Yeah.
Right? I think that
Yeah.
that's a problem. I mean, I don't think that the art is a problem, but the lack of explanation sometimes can be because, not because Warren is going to go through, but he's trying to pick up these coins. He's obviously gotten himself into some trouble and is trying to clear his name with the quarters, but certainly trying to do something. He's trying to look for an explanation. Also, though, that the whole idea of where do thoughts come from? Who knows where thoughts come from?
Yeah. No, we don't. And that's the thing is there's actually a debate in psychology. The whole idea is, does language form thoughts or does thoughts form language? Like, does one come before the other? Are we thinking before we speak, or we just we finally think and we speak at the same time. Like, what is it? And the truth is we don't know, because the only time we can express our thoughts,
That's okay.
is through when we can communicate them.
Do you know who John McWhorter is?
I don't know.
He's a
Maybe.
I don't know if he still is teaching. He used to be I think a professor out at like Columbia, maybe, or someplace like that. And he does linguistics.
Okay.
And one of his things that he's known for specifically are like cultural language and roots. And I mean, he's got a lot of books that are specifically, not just popular linguist books, but some of them are, and kind of examine rap lyrics and things like that, and try to look for the root word and what the historical story might be there, and which is a really interesting way of thinking about history. Anyway, it's just through the words that we use for things.
Sure.
And it's not always. A lot of times, it's counterintuitive where things come from.
Yeah.
They're not, and it kind of makes you wonder about a lot of things. Like, for example, a cuss word. What is it that makes the cuss word a cuss word? I mean, it's just a word, right?
Right.
And at some point, it probably came, at the time that it came about, it was pretty commonly used. But over time, people were given an alternative meaning for that same word. And so people started to identify one of those words with a different meaning that wasn't good. And that created social stigma or whatever.
Or even a certain kind of person, right? That kind of person uses this language.
Right.
And we don't want to be associated or like that person.
Right.
So we're going to use something else.
Right.
And I think that's kind of society decides, right?
Yeah.
And that's crazy.
And that's language. That's what makes it language, is that it's common.
Yeah, so we all understand.
Right.
Exactly.
Yeah. I mean, that's an interesting phenomenon, but it's not necessarily the word. It's not the word, the historical word's meaning that's wrong.
Right.
And in this, I guess in that instance, like depending on what the interpretation of it is, that is in the state of a dynamic state, I guess, where it's in the middle of changing between one and another. What the meaning is, or who is interpreting it, that ends up having some type of a fairly serious. I mean, it could also be a good meaning, by the way. It could be something that's good, that's being interpreted and changes things.
Just now, like the kids in their language that they use, like cap, which it means like you're lying.
Oh,
but when you hear
that. Cap,
like that's cap. That's a lie.
No,
that's
I've never heard
true.
that.
That's the thing.
No, I've never heard that. That's interesting, because when I think of cap, I think of like the 1980s.
Shooting slang. Somebody, right?
Yeah,
like
cap.
you're going to cap. Thank you. I know. And then the other one they use now is smack. That's smack. That means it's good.
Oh.
And what do I think of when I think of smack? Heroin.
Right.
So,
yeah.
And so it's like, okay, it's like when does it change? What changes? And that's what we see with the influencers from social media.
Yeah.
And that's crazy that it can change that much. And it doesn't seem like it's that long ago.
Right.
But it can change that quickly.
It kind of makes you wonder about the velocity of it. Like, of course, like back in the heyday, before the prime days of the internet, where we have information in it, it maybe like is putting or accelerating the interpretation cycle is so much faster, or maybe it's exactly the way it used to be. It's just,
I don't think so. I think there's probably a lag.
A lag?
There was a lag.
Okay.
Because we wouldn't get the same words and information from the East Coast.
And that's how dialects
come
so about,
different.
Right?
Absolutely. But now we see it happens so much faster because of the internet, social media, that it's not like everybody's using it kind of thing. It's interesting.
Yeah, it is interesting for sure.
So that all ties back to what we're talking about, because it is about the words that do influence your memory. And it can make a huge difference. And I think that one of the big things that I wanted to kind of, talk about is the idea of anybody remembering anything in an altered state of consciousness. And if we think of any altered state, it could be sleeping, dreaming. It could be hypnosis, meditation, and even drug use. Like, I think all of those things are an altered state, and it makes me nervous that sometimes in those states, people are remembering things, but are they legit? And that's the thing. It's like, is it a legitimate technique to help somebody really bring about a repressed memory from a traumatic event? Or are we doing what had happened to Eileen Franklin, and we are planting false memories?
Right.
And that's what, like, I think that is something that people need to be aware of. There's some different techniques that people are using in psychology, in therapy, that does put people in an altered state of consciousness to help with memories, to help block some childhood trauma. But with being in that altered state, is it real? Because that's the whole point of altered state.
So you were saying this person was, what's the word?
Hypnotized.
Mm-hmm. And you're saying though that there are also people doing things like what were we talking about? Was it microdosing?
Microdosing,
With the
also
LSD,
psilocybins.
Not LCD though. No. That's a TV.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're not just watching that TV. Just watching the TV doesn't put you in an altered state. It's the LSD.
Right. LSD, like anything, even mushrooms.
Yeah.
And
but
have
been around for a long time. I
right.
mean, those things have been around for
and ecstasy.
For ages.
All of these different things that they're putting you and and that's the thing is like MDMA, ecstasy was actually used in therapy in the 80s. Like it was one of the things that they used for group and couples and family therapy type stuff. And I think they're going back to it, but we all know it does put you in an altered state. And how legitimate are the things that come about from an altered state? Even your perceptions are off. That's like the thing it does. It causes hallucinations. So is it possible that instead of actually helping you remember something, it is causing some sort of hallucination, an altered memory, and possibly even planting false memories?
So when you're remembering a dream, mm-hmm. for instance, is there any type of parallel outside of the fact that obviously in the basic, it's coming from the same brain?
Sure.
That is taking place when you're remembering something and when you're dreaming a memory. Does that make sense?
Mm-hmm. Now, and the question is what? The
question is there one... Like let's say there's a traumatic mm-hmm. event. Somebody's sure. remembering the traumatic event. They're remembering it. They're remembering it versus they're dreaming about it.
Sure. If I had to look at the idea of like any memory or things that do with dreaming, I would say that those would be one and the same. Because a lot of times your dreams are made up of different memories, things that you've experienced. So I think that would be the same memory. Like it would be a legit memory, possibly. Again, it could be altered sure. by...
Depends on the person.
Right, absolutely. And it could be altered by a number of things. Maybe you watched a movie, and that's what a lot of times whatever happens in the movie, you also see happening, right? So then you have a dream that night that something horrible happens to you that you saw in the movie.
Right.
And then now... could that possibly make you feel like, wait, did this happen to me? And I guess if it's strong enough, it could implant that idea that it did happen to you. When in reality, it could have just been the movie that you watched.
It could have been.
I don't,
It'd have to be a pretty powerful.
Absolutely.
A powerful emotional movie,
mm-hmm.
I guess.
Yeah.
To be able to have the power, I guess, to manipulate. But you know what? That's exactly what propaganda is.
Sure,
Isn't it? You create an association.
Yeah, and I think you would have to be just the idea that you have to be self-aware. Like your self-awareness. Like I just watched that movie. That's probably why I had that. Yeah. But if it does bring so much emotion, which that's what propaganda does, right? It's like taps into the emotionality of everything, which then causes us to be more involved and have a higher engagement,
right?
Like more skin of the game, I always like to say.
Yeah.
And the idea is then, why wouldn't it? Why wouldn't it alter or affect the way that you remember something? Sure. In the movie Memento, have you ever seen that one?
Yep. Okay. You know what? I take that back. Memento is one that I started to watch.
Okay.
And it's about the guy that can't remember anything
Right.
after like 45 minutes or something,
Yes.
right?
So what he has is the memory that's called amnesia. But what happens is it's a traumatic event happened, and he can't form new memories.
Ah.
So it's like every single time he wakes up, it's like it just like the traumatic event. His wife died.
Clean slate.
Right, just started. So he doesn't remember if he met this person, if they were coming to get him. So he starts tattooing and doing stuff all over him. And in that, he says, your memory is not a record. It's just your interpretation. It can change the size of the room, the color of a car. It just depends on you. And so it's your interpretation of the event, not a record.
So it's a distortion.
It can be, right? I mean, it's really difficult to, just depending on, even if it's your, like the way that you feel about it can change the memory.
Sure.
And that's what we see with like the concept of it just depends on what it's in. If it's like one day, the day that my husband proposed to me, horrible things happened. My brother kicked me into a cactus. I got bucked off a horse. I mean, it was just, but I don't remember it that way because that's when he proposed to me. Like it ended up being a good day, a very eventful day. But I probably would not remember that day if that wouldn't have happened. Like I wouldn't be like, oh yeah, the day that I fell in the cactus. But I do remember it because of the good stuff that happened as well.
Right.
So,
and it's, I guess it's worth noting, I would probably remember being kicked into a cactus.
yeah. Oh, my brother. I'm the baby of 4. It happens all the time.
And typical bruh.
Yeah. Bruh.
Bruh. Well, that's fascinating. I mean,
Yeah.
I feel like there's a lot of historical examples of that phenomenon taking place at the collective level. I mean, that's what you're talking about is kind of like is that a form of is that a psychotic problem, or is that
Not necessarily.
like
it's an everyday problem.
A error?
It's just, it's just the way we function. So the truth is we don't legitimately know about any of your memories. And the only way that
Right.
we do is through recording things. Like, this is why we take so many pictures. This is why we have, this was your birthday, so you can remember that you had a birthday. This is what we did. This is because you may not accurately remember your birthday, even
Right.
though it seems like it would be personally important. But the fact is that it just, our memory is not very good. That's the truth.
We've got a lot of other things going on.
Absolutely.
You can't live in like 3 or 4 different places at
Absolutely.
the exact same time. And we're not, I mean, what we're going to discover about artificial intelligence is that it's imperfect
Yeah.
as well.
Absolutely.
We're going to put our stock into it, just like we do surveillance, cameras and computer networks and all these other things, identifying specific behaviors. Not that they don't happen, obviously they
Right.
do, but the possibility of something being wrong doesn't mean you shouldn't use it, right?
Right.
Obviously, our memories serve a really important purpose.
Absolutely. So, I mean, we're probably going to be wrong sometimes, but there's going to be at least some of it that seems to be right. Something happened, but our perception could change it, right? And this is why a lot of times if something has happened, if you notice something, if you witness something, they want you to remember right now, because then you have like less time for something else to influence it. So if you can have like a recall right now, exactly what had happened, then you're less likely to be influenced by whatever else you're exposed to. So
That's interesting.
it is.
Yeah, there's a lot. And also, I mean, it kind of makes you wonder about a lot of things. So
Yeah.
one I guess wonder, are, in the Matrix, admittedly, we're talking about this all the time,
Always.
like that kid, the small guy in the dream world. No, in the real world, I'm sorry. Mouse, isn't
Okay.
that the character's name? He's got the short hair.
Oh, yes.
And he's the one that puts together the realities that they train inside of. And it's the woman in the red dress.
Yeah.
And he was talking about, I think they gave him something to eat, right? And
Yeah.
Neo said, "What is this?" And he told him what it was. And he said, "It's really supposed to taste like tasty wheat."
Yeah.
Or something along those lines. And he's like, "Tasty wheat? Don't you remember tasty wheat?"
Yeah.
He's like, it makes you wonder whether or not, he goes, "How did the machines know what tasty wheat actually tasted like. He said, how do we know that what we know about tasty wheat actually tasted like tasty wheat? Maybe what I remember as tasty wheat was actually tastes more like chicken.
Yeah.
It sounds like it's all relative, as we've talked about before as well. There clearly is still a real world where there is an unfolding current environment. But again, to the point where we instill confidence in the things in the pieces of information that we should trust, and don't put stock in the things that we shouldn't trust.
Right.
And knowing what those are, or even maybe the arrogance of believing that we know what those are, can lead to catastrophe.
Sure.
I'm thinking specifically of World War I.
Yeah.
That was a good example of something. The Holocaust is an example of putting stock in information and it being incorrect information.
Yeah.
No doubt there were people that knew that there were distortions of perception embedded inside of the system that had where people were gathering information in an attempt to gather a good faith attempt to gather information, found information that was bad information, which changed the equation. Was significant enough to change the outcome of the equation that they were working on. And not knowing the difference, by the way, until really much later, after historians have had a chance to digest the ramifications, the consequences, and understand or try to understand it in a context that made distortions of that make sense, and being known as what a distortion it really is a lie.
Yeah, and that's the idea. Is like in the moment, a lot of times you don't understand how bad it is, right? Because you're in the moment, you're living, you're adjusting to the information that you actually have and what you know and what you've experienced and your perception. And then as you learn, as you experience, and as your perceptions can change or expand and learn, then maybe it changes and you're like, oh my gosh, during that time. This always reminds me of American History X. Yeah. Where in the, when he was there in that time, being a white supremacist was the thing. Like, that's how everybody did it. That's the way we lived our life. This is our belief. And then he was sent to prison.
Right.
And then he was he was forced to see other situations. And he came back and was like, whoa.
That's a good movie.
It is a good movie.
I haven't seen that movie in a while. It's hard to watch the first hour of it, because it's all, so there's so much hate.
It is.
And I remember watching it. I watched it when I was in high school, at a friend's house. I don't want to say for a whole hour, I was sitting there thinking, man, when are we going to leave? Because I'm done watching this. This is too, it's a little bit too, it seems like it's
so extreme.
The whole first half, though, was in black and white. And you don't see, that's the whole idea, I think.
It's like, that you only see what you see, and then you finally get exposed, and it's like opens up so many more. And that's kind of this idea too, right? And in the moment, you have only what you have, right? And so you can make bad decisions.
Sure.
Not having all the information.
Certainly.
And then once you get all the information, then you can decide if you're still going to make bad decisions.
Right. So that's kind of like I think an interesting twist here.
Yeah.
Alongside the current Trump administration, right?
Yeah.
Specifically because in 2015 and 2016, you have the ability and the inexperience of dealing with what presumably now I see as different. I see it differently than I did in 2016.
Right.
I think the main reason is because you don't have the surprise of getting to know a candidate who seems to be more outspoken than you're typically hearing people and used to hearing people talk about politics and government and about other candidates.
Yeah.
It is a plain way of speaking that, just not, it's a less, I don't want to say diplomatic. It just doesn't take any time to take things off of words.
Right.
It's just exposing for what somebody's raw experience is, in order to get the thing done and be done with it. Which is probably more of an efficiency thing. Maybe they probably could help, to be a little more diplomatic at times. And I think that the point is that in 2020, when running for re-election, and we had this whole dramatic thing of COVID and the riots going on and all kinds of other things, was that there was a chance for people to try to make a different decision in the presidential election, which they did. But then have 4 more years and another presidential election opportunity to listen to what they had heard from 2016 again.
Yeah.
And try to put it into context. And overwhelmingly won. More so than in 2016, which must be really hard to accept.
Sure, absolutely.
That's fascinating.
It is, and that's I don't know, this brings up the whole memory, like how are we going to remember this?
It's a collective thing, yeah.
Yeah. How are we going to remember? Are we going to remember it as he learned, or is it, did he learn, or did we just finally listen?
Right.
And that's kind of...
Yeah. No. I mean, I agree. And like, where was it ever really, it makes you, I mean, it really, was it ever as bad as people were making it sound?
Sure.
Because they were trying to convey urgency, and in so doing, using salesmanship strategies, as you do in politics and in government, and I guess in marketing and everything else.
Everything.
Trying to sell the sizzle, but not really being very representative of the steak.
Sure. Yeah, I agree. It's all so interesting. There's so many things.
Yeah. Yeah, it sure is. I feel like there's a lot of potential places to go.
Yeah.
With a topic like this. Mainly, I mean, there are other things going on as well, around how people decide those things. I suppose that what is it that makes somebody more suggestible would be another. I mean, not just are they under the influence of something, are they prone to being overly dramatic, maybe being sarcastic, maybe being some form of unrepresentative of the truth.
Yeah.
I mean, teasing, for example, would be another example. I would argue is, I mean, I like to do that kind of stuff every now and then, with my kids or with my wife. I mean, we try to have fun, and sometimes it's fun to, I mean, have I don't know what that term is, of an alternative reality that you're joking around about. And what that would be, teasing, right?
Sure.
I did this, and really or a magic trick would be an example of an illusion that's deliberately done, which we would also call a deception, or maybe planting a memory where you believe that you're seeing something that looks real, but really
it's
like
illusion.
the frog. I've got a frog in there in my office that's just it has like mirrors,
Yeah.
And I mean, you look inside those mirrors enough with enough reflections, it looks like a frog is sticking up out of it.
Yeah.
And that's the whole idea, is that people with the tools and the resources to manipulate lots of different types of information can really play games with people's lives.
Absolutely.
And it's
I mean, of course, everything in moderation is okay. Yeah. Right? I mean, going and seeing a magic trick, it's really good and great. But getting it to where you can manipulate and hurt and do something, then it's like, okay, wait, what are we doing now? But that's the idea, is like, we do. Psychologists know. I'm not all of them. Like, I'm not saying I know everything, because I don't. In fact, the more I learn, I always say the more I learn, the less I know.
Right.
But there are people that may know some tricks, right? That's the thing. That's the name of the game. Salesmen, marketers, marketers, that sounds wrong. But they are the people who, they know the little, ins and outs to get people to say yes or no. Or
do you remember us watching the clip of Joe Rogan talking about what Elon Musk, the gesture that he made, that was being portrayed in the media as being a clear Nazi salute.
Yes.
And I mean, I don't know Elon Musk, so I think most people don't know Elon Musk and don't have the tools that they need to be able to determine whether or not that was. It doesn't mean that it's wrong for people to draw conclusions, but maybe a little bit reckless to get out there and try to predefine and package it as something that's clearly an extreme perspective, and really needs to be to have more information and time provided to make sure that you're accounting for those possible distortions.
Absolutely. And I think that's what we need to see a lot of times in so much information instead of just jumping to conclusions by the information that's provided.
Yes.
100%.
Joe Rogan in that clip, remember, he said that that in the past people have portrayed him like he was a skinhead, and that he had gone out there, and he was like, they deliberately took a picture of me talking about a UFC event in which I had my hand up waving goodbye to the audience to make me look like, I was doing this. And they used a picture and a photo that had the most dramatic example possible of that image, not one that was going to be like the watered down version, because they're trying to sell their story.
Yep.
It's a narrative.
Yep. And that's what it is. That's what we do. That's not not like we do, but I'm saying the collective people. Sure. Right?
Yeah,
we do.
Sure.
When we find information to reinforce the way that we want other people to see, the way we believe, and therefore sometimes we have the information completely wrong.
Right.
And it does influence people's perception.
Like we in our classes we talk about classical republicanism. From time to time, it's like a mindset that puts collective good over individual good. Mm-hmm. And the whole idea, I guess, in classical Greece, and there's a lot of depth to this that I'm just not going to get to.
Yeah.
And frankly, don't have. I mean, that probably even I would argue the expertise to discuss in detail, because you'd have to you'd have to fully be a student of Aristotle and Plato, and not just have read the primary text. That doesn't make you anything.
No.
It's like reading the primary text, but also reading all of the ancillary materials and all of the materials about interpretations, and then reading the history around it too, because Aristotle himself is writing from a perspective. You want to make sure it's not a distortion.
Yeah.
So anyway, his version of belief system and others as well, right? Of the common good, or the collective good, and collective what civic duty is, for example. I think has some things to teach about that issue. I mean, obviously, its counterpart, which is natural rights philosophy, that comes out in the 1500s, the 1600s, really has its roots much older than that, though, thousands of years old. These true traditions, though, for us in the West, have both the good of the group or the team, particularly around small teams with classical Greek stuff, and then larger groups require people to respect the individual person, because there's more diversity.
Sure.
And you have to have more diversity in some ways to have the larger, especially now, like the larger group, the larger state, they just don't exist. We don't all live in small towns anymore. No. It's just not that kind of world. The economy's moved on. We have, there's other things going on for us.
Sure.
But anyway, I throw that out there because it seems like there's some wisdom in that the ancient way of thinking, particularly for the West, the way we consume information, the way that we care about and try to find value in things. Especially, I'm going to just throw this with our culture. Specifically, we consume products.
Yeah,
it's what we do. We don't. I mean, not necessarily. That's not bad. It's not. There's nothing. There's absolutely nothing wrong with having a culture that's a consumption-based culture. You don't have the level of suffering that are going on in other parts of the world, and so our relative perspective of suffering is really not. I mean, it's not really something that is symmetrical to, I would argue, somebody who is suffering from a famine in Africa, right? I mean, it doesn't mean that it's not suffering,
right? But
having to choose the water that I like less because they're all out of the water that I like more is not suffering. So conflating it as suffering doesn't help the person in Africa.
No, right? And that's and that again, it's a perception. We always, what is it, the first world problems or whatever? It's like, my cell phone's dead. Okay.
Yeah.
There's places that don't have bathrooms.
Do you remember did you ever see the Jerry Seinfeld stand-up where he was talking about cell phones? I think it was 2009 or so. It was post Seinfeld time period. But Jerry Seinfeld's on Jimmy Kimmel or someplace like that. Oh, no. You know, it was, who's the Saturday Night Live, the SNL guy, who's, he's been on ABC or whatever for forever. He took over after Jay Leno. I almost said after Jared Leto, which is
no,
not
he's
the same
not doing
person.
it.
Okay.
Why can't I think of who it is?
He was in a lot of different skits.
Fallon.
Jimmy Fallon.
Yes.
That's right. Jimmy, the other Jimmy.
Jimmy. He's hilarious.
And Jerry Seinfeld talked about how he looks at battery power for your cell phone as being representative of like how much energy you actually have. So when your phone battery is about to die, you're like running out of energy and you're just trying to get to the charger. Just need to get a little bit further to the charger, and I'm going to plug this in and I feel better.
Yeah.
I can sit down. You know, there's a weird correlation that he's not wrong about.
I know.
I mean,
it's true.
You ever look at that and go, oh gosh, I'm almost out of energy?
Yes.
But that means you're not physically almost out of energy.
Nope.
It's your phone.
Right. Yeah.
Feels like suffering. That's exactly.
Isn't that crazy?
Yeah.
That doesn't make any sense. But that's a perception.
Yeah.
And that's what we do.
Yeah, it's good to have things in perspective, I think.
I hope so.
I hope so. I don't know. And also admiring art for art.
Yeah.
That's maybe also the First Amendment lesson to it is that there is such a thing as art.
Yeah.
You know, and that there are deliberate distortions to tell sometimes larger truths that are also real.
Yeah.
I don't know how that. I mean, we talk in my classes. We talk about, for example, the Alamo.
Okay.
As an example, not because it's a myth. It
Right.
obviously actually happened, and there are the people that died and fought there are 100% heroes in my book.
Right.
It took not godlike experience to do that. It took human-like experience to do that. And so thinking of them as gods doesn't help maybe understand why the heroism was real.
Right.
Knowing or thinking that because they were slaveholders that they could not have possibly been heroes doesn't
Right.
help either, because it doesn't explain the human choice to
Right.
stay and die, certainly,
Right.
and know that you're going to die without and starving the whole time for 13 days as well. It doesn't provide the respect and
Right.
dignity
If you say,
that
well,
a
they're
historical
gods.
event like
Right.
that.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah, Davy Crockett. It couldn't have possibly happened to Davy Crockett because, you know, he can
Davy
leap
Crockett.
he can leap over a mountain or
Yeah.
whatever it is that
Yeah.
that people say. And so I don't know. I think like that too has some type of an expressive quality to what we're talking about
Sure.
that also needs to be accounted for, because sometimes people are doing it deliberately, which would be
Yeah.
different, separate from the media. With media, and this gets into a whole other thing, I think, and it doesn't have to just be media, obviously, but even when we talk, I had a friend that has since passed on, but he used to tell stories, and when he told stories, they were the biggest thing.
Right.
He would change out the words. He was known for his storytelling. It was so entertaining to listen to him tell stories, not because they were necessarily interesting stories, but they were an entertaining version
Yeah.
of a story that wasn't as entertaining as it's being told.
As a real life. Yeah.
And we all, I mean, I miss him.
Yeah.
And I miss hearing those interpretations of reality and everything, because they were funny.
Yeah.
You know, and they're
And it wasn't like he didn't lie. He just
yeah.
changed it a little
What was
bit.
the
his
term?
perception.
What is the term that people use that they have? Embellishment.
Embellishment.
Embellishment. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
All right.
So
well, good.
Yeah. All right. Well, what time is it? Wow.
I
Oh
know.
my gosh, it's been an hour.
It has. It always does.
It's crazy. All right. Well, y'all take care and
Yeah. Have
I
a
guess-
good one.
All right. Oh, by the way, I meant to tell you, Argentina has expanded again in our
That's
space.
crazy.
I don't know.
Awesome.
I don't know how or why, but welcome, and
Yeah.
also we're happy that some potential trade relations with you guys is opening up a little bit
that'd be
more.
great.
So that'll be that's some good stuff.
It is.
Anyway, all right. Well, thank y'all so much, and we'll talk to you later.
All right. Have a good
Bye-bye.
one.